Space, the geographer's frontier. These are the episodes of Coffee and Geography, its ongoing mission to explore exotic new locations, to seek out inspiring people and innovative ideas, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. I am Alistair Hamill, geography teacher from Northern Ireland, and this is your host, Kit Rackley.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Coffee and Geography podcast. And I've spoken to an Adrian on my side of the country in the east, and now for an Adrian on the other side of the country in the southwest. I mean, pretty much, we're quite far from each other. You're in Exeter, apart. Adrian Ferraro.
Yeah.
How are you doing,
Hi.
Adrian?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Yeah, so introducing Adrian. Listen to this, folks. This is amazing. Adrian is an accidental educationalist turned entrepreneur working at a cross-section of adventure, conservation, education and climate change. I should say this a bit more dramatically, I feel. His latest venture... His latest venture is the Bioasis, a low-carbon residential adventure program igniting planet-positive behavioural change in schools and organisations. Adrian lectures on the subject on ethical tourism and has previously run an overseas school expedition company taking over 8,000 young people away to destinations as diverse as Ghana, Venezuela, Israel and the Himalayas. Wow, that's pretty impressive. 8,000 young people.
Yeah.
How many lives have you touched?
Nearly kind of nine. I was 19 years, 18, 19 years, that sort of number. Took that many away. Yeah, and it is amazing. I kind of think where those young people have gone to physically, but also now, years afterwards, how we've kind of touched their lives and affected their thinking on global geopolitics and climate change and all the rest of it. Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
It's incredible. I've got my own story to tell, which we'll put a pin in those things when we come back to it. We'll definitely compare notes. But let's just put it this way: my 12 doesn't pales in comparison with 8,000. But we'll still share notes. You're we're in the coffee and geography coffee house. That's always a mouthful for me.
Yep.
I've got my cup of tea. What do you usually drink when you come into a coffee house?
I've got a cup of coffee. I'm on just plain black coffee. Yeah. I've got my brew here with me actually, because you said to bring what your I don't know whether the camera's going to be able to get that. No,
put it in front of your chest. We might. Something. Is it Chef's Brew? Did it say? Yeah, Choose Brew.
Yeah.
Cruise Brew.
Cruise Brew. And this. I like this, and I like things that have multiple positive impacts. I think that's like if you can get more than one positive impact from a item or a bit of kit or a product or something, I think it's good. So this is a Cruise Brew from Owen's Organic Coffee. Owen's is a Devon-based coffee distributor, and so they're organic, they're fair trade. And this particular pack also contributes to Devon Air Ambulance. And I just love the fact that that's like ticking so many boxes, and it's a good cup of coffee at the end of the day, which is probably the most important thing. But black coffee. I didn't drink coffee for about the first 40 years of my life, and then just went straight to black coffee and haven't looked back. So
that's amazing. So, folks, what we do is that we put all of these brews on our Coffee and Geography map for if you're a teacher or you're just curious, you can explore all these different brews, but, geographically, and also we'll put the links up there to Owens and Cruise Brew and all that kind of stuff, so they can investigate the sustainability aspects of it all. So we don't promote one brand or the other here. What we like to do is to encourage folks to kind of look at the claims of sustainability, do a bit of critical thinking, and if they want to drink tea and coffee, they can make informed choices. So there you go. That's one to
Yeah.
add to. That's a new one we haven't had. Very local one, which is
Yeah.
lovely. So that's one we'll add
Yeah.
to the list. So you're down there in the southwest in Exeter. So actually, my
Yes.
colleague, give a shout out to my colleague, Nikki Shantz, who's the regional hub manager for the Southwest, who is employed by the Met Office, which has their main base of operations in Exeter.
Yep.
So you're there too.
Okay.
So I tell us a little bit about Exeter. Is that your part of the world? Like, are you Southwest through and through, or is it a place you've come to a certain part of your life? Tell
Place
us a
I've
little
come
bit about
to.
your journey to Exeter.
Yeah. So I've been living here about 26 years, I think, and very much see it as home. I can't really imagine there's anywhere better to live, to be honest. Exeter as a city is lovely. It's pretty small as a city goes. It's maybe, I think, 130,000 people, maybe at the moment, I think.
Mm.
And obviously on its doorstep, I've got Dartmoor National Park, Exmouth's not that far away. Got all the south coast of South Devon and little inlets and estuaries, which is great for paddleboarding. I'm quite into paddleboarding. You've got
Nice.
Coast Path, you've got North Devon, which is about an hour away, hour and 20 minutes away, which has got good surfing. So, and then it's only 2 hours, 10 minutes on a fast train to London if you need to get to London. So,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, Exeter's pretty good place to live, and just a generally lovely feel to it. Everybody's pretty chilled out, and you can walk through town on a Saturday, and you're probably bound to bump into somebody you know. Yeah, it's just got a great feel to it. So I love living next to it. So previous to that, I moved around quite a bit. I was born in Buckinghamshire, went down to Plymouth, spent
Okay.
sort of school age years up in Birmingham and then near Reading, and went back to university at
Wow.
Birmingham. So yeah, kind of moved around a bit, but definitely see Exeter as home now. Yeah.
So the question I always like to ask folks, Adrian, is base how has Exeter? You've been to Exeter for quite a while now, quite a large part of your life, but you've been to all these other places. Like you were born in Buckinghamshire. You went.
Yeah.
You've experienced Birmingham quite a fair bit. So in terms of your geographical sense of place, then, which makes your identity, what would you say? What would you just say forms your identity in terms of geography? So, like, have you picked up like habits that are Southwest through and through that you can't shake now, and you've integrated them, or is there a slice of Birmingham in you that you've taken down there? It's anything really you can characterize based on where you've been and where you've lived.
Interesting question. Well, don't think I haven't picked up a Devonshire or a Birmingham accent, which is maybe I'm quite pleased about. Um, uh, maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know. Nothing against Devon or Birmingham accents.
Of course.
Uh, yeah, I think if I was to say a sense of place, then Devon generally is pretty chilled out, relaxed. We don't take ourselves too seriously. You go up to London and you see everybody's, driving around like loonies and, got no time at all and always rushing to the next thing. And I like to think that people that live in Devon and Exeter have just got a bit more of a work-life balance, a bit more of, okay, well, it's a lovely afternoon or evening, let's get off half an hour early and we'll go to the beach. And
Hmm.
that's what life's about. And I think that's quite a Southwest based attitude, that we can always, even if we're working hard and we're working in the city, we know that Dartmoor is only 25 minutes away, or we know we can get to a beach, or we can go surfing at the weekend if necessary. And that for me is just a great quality of life, and a great sense of what the Southwest as a place brings, and offers. So
Hmm.
yeah.
I'm trying to think kind of the parallels here in kind of Norfolk. I think there's definitely parallels between kind of like, especially as you go further south and west, where the coast kind of starts the concertina between, so you've got less and less travel, but also you're not
Yes.
too far away from being other connected. I think Exeter I mean, I don't know Exeter very well at all. I mean, I've only visited once to go to the Met offices once, but I would imagine that there's parallels between, say, Exeter and Norwich and kind of Devon and Norfolk, really, because of but geographically the way they're kind of isolated, but
Yeah,
not. They're kind of Exeter's almost is more or less on the end of the transport network, because the transport network gets thinner and thinner as you go
yeah,
towards
yeah,
Truro and Newquay and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And Norwich is really the same. So, and yeah, we have that kind of
yeah.
culture as well, where we've got kind of like the Norfolk Broads nearby. We've got all this lovely countryside, but we've got our kind of cosmopolitan urban areas, and then we've got the North Norfolk coast. So I'm
I
just
wonder whether
wondering
it's
whether
something to
if
do with the sea as well, the proximity of the sea,
yeah, yeah,
and maybe small city within, big landscapes, and
yeah.
the availability of to trying to escape through from urban areas, just sort of gives it that particular feel to it. I think maybe.
Yeah, I've a thought experiment here, and I'd love to hear what listeners maybe think of this, and maybe huge protests and throwing eggs at the radio or something like that. But I wonder, if you could displace the population of, well, swap around the populations of Exeter and
Mm,
Norwich, would
mm.
what
How would it
would
work?
be, yeah, how would it work? What would people find what would people be okay with? They'd find comfortable with, and in what aspects would they feel totally out of place? That would be
Yeah.
interesting.
There's a TV program in
Ah,
that they do these TV programs where they kind of swap people, families,
what?
and
Yeah, wife swap.
jobs.
City swap. I don't know. What do we call it? Settlement swap. That's got a bit more of an
Yeah,
alliteration to it. Just lift the whole entire population. I mean, there's about 100. About the populations are similar, so just
yeah, roughly. Yeah. What
one
could
house to
possibly
one
go wrong?
house. What could
Yeah.
possibly go wrong? Yeah, that's fascinating. Um, All right, I want to move on now to what you've mentioned, which is fabulous. We're talking about like your journeys, your travel. You've been pretty much all over the place. You've travelled to 60 countries worldwide, and you're hugely passionate about
Yeah.
ethical tourism, which we know is in what we say when geography teachers they say that that's a controversial issue, not so much as in you've got deep-seated passionate arguments, but more that there are so many different stakeholders and points of view on what do we mean by ethical tourism and stuff like that. So before we
Yeah.
move on to you doing the things that you've done with young people, which is amazing,
Mm.
what would you define is ethical tourism? And in an ideal world, like maybe you've got a real life example of what quintessential and actual ethical tourism is, which doesn't do any greenwashing. It's there's no fortress conservation, anything like that. So what do you
Sure.
think is ethical tourism, and have you got like an ideal example of one?
Yeah. I think at the very basis of ethical tourism, we have to remember as tourists, we are incredibly privileged to be in the position of even being able to be tourists. And going to somebody else's country, it doesn't even have to be another country. It could be, me as a extra person coming to Norwich.
Right.
We're privileged in that position, and as such, we have to remember that we are a guest in that location, and it's not our home. We don't have a right to be there as such. We have a privilege, and with that privilege comes some responsibility. And particularly if you're going to another destination, that's probably maybe not, a different culture, different major religion, a whole different sort of setup of economy and expectations around what's acceptable to wear, how to act, how to treat local people. If you uh, form or you come from a basis of I am a guest in this country, and how should I act on that basis? If you start from that perspective, I think everything else then kind of comes on from that.
Mm.
So uh, if you're respecting the religions and the culture, and you're, in a Muslim country, for instance, and you should dress appropriately. You may not, agree with everything in that country, but that's their country, and you are a guest in their country. And if you uh, embrace everything that comes with that acknowledgement that you're a guest in their country, I think you get a much richer experience of how
Mm.
to what you get from that experience of that traveling in that country. And I think then, you know, for me, there are sort of a few pillars of responsible tourism or ethical tourism. One is certainly respecting cultures and that you're in somebody else's country, you're a guest there. One is the environment, generally. Both not doing harm, but hopefully doing some good as well. Tourism, I think, as an industry, it's a huge industry worldwide and
Yes.
can have a potential for a huge positive impact. Essentially, it's probably the world's biggest money mover from countries that have lots of money to countries that have not so much money. And if that is done in the right way, that money can have a huge positive impact, so long as
Yeah.
the money is being spent in the right places and it's being used in the right way. And so the question of where is my money going, who's benefiting from that money as part of that tourism activity, I think is really critical, and not enough people think about it. So as a really uh, tangible example, if you want to go on a long weekend to Paris, not even anything too adventurous, a long weekend to Paris, how are you going to go about it? You might, if you're thinking about your carbon, you might jump on a Eurostar and take the train rather than fly. But if you want to
Mm.
book some accommodation, uh, the easiest thing to do is jump on booking.com and book a Holiday Inn Express. You know what you're going to get, and it's going to be up to certain standards. It's going to be reliable. And that's nice and easy. But your money, if you follow where the money goes, and I think of a if you're a, spending £1 on something, it's a vote for that thing. So by spending your money at Holiday Inn
Mm.
Express or Booking.com, you're voting for that thing. If you compare that and all the different layers of international, uh, investment opportunities and banks and everything that is probably part of Booking.com and Holiday Inn Express or whoever it might be, international hotel group, the money is not so much of the money is staying around in Paris.
Right.
The money is being
Right.
siphoned off to, some investment big fund in New York or London or wherever. And if you compare that as a model to, say, booking a local B&B, owner managed and owner run bed and breakfast in Paris, uh, you know that the money you spend is going directly into the pockets of the people that run that business. It's You're probably getting a more authentic travel experience and an experience of Paris. You'll get to speak to people who have, it's their business, it's their home, it's their livelihood. It's a much more enriching tourism activity, and all of the money that you're spending on that is going into, those people and that local business. The problem is it's much more difficult to find that
Yeah.
as a place to stay. And not only is it more difficult to find, it's much more unknown in terms of its quality or reliability. And so it's much easier just to do booking.com. And so, if we as consumers are thinking about how we want to spend our money to make a bigger impact, we need to think about where our money is going, and how we travel is often far more important than whether we travel or not. And sure, there are lots of arguments about ethical tourism, about whether you should
Of course. Yeah.
fly, conundrums about whether you should have tourism in Antarctica or not, whether the benefits of somebody being a climate or, ambassador for protecting Antarctica, does that outweigh the carbon and the potential environmental impact that comes from their visit? So there are lots of different ways, and uh, one of the examples I used actually was school groups. When we were taking school groups overseas, we'd do a sort of ethical tourism workshop for them and get them to think about lots of these pros and cons and whether it was okay to do certain things or act in certain ways. one of the examples was about slum tourism in, say, India.
Mm.
And is it okay as a tourist to go and visit a slum in, say, Mumbai? And I started with an example of, if you are staying in your nice 5-star luxury hotel, and you're picked up, you arrange a trip through the hotel concierge, and you arrange your trip to the local slum with a local company. You jump on the bus, they have a guide. You get off at the slum, you walk through with your guide, looking around, uh, and it's quite voyeuristic uh, in
Mm.
its tourism kind of approach. Not really very much money is going into anybody in the slum, and then the outcome of that really is that most tourists would think, well, I'm glad I don't live here, and it's
Yeah,
quite
and
sort of
especially,
pitiful tourism.
yeah, especially if such organisations, they frame like these voyeuristic kind of things using words like
Yeah,
slum, which is
yeah,
problematic in itself, as we know. So
yeah,
slum tourism,
yeah,
which is an actual term, is problematic, because you're almost seeding the psychological kind of
yeah,
way that these tourists are going to think about things, you know, before they even get there.
yeah. Absolutely. So invariably, we'd ask the students. So what do you think? Is that a good form of tourism or a bad form of tourism? And everybody would say, bad form of tourism shouldn't be allowed.
Mm.
It's not good. It's kind of feels a bit, yeah, a bit sort of, you know, not nice. So, which I would agree with. However, if you flip it on its head and say, okay, well, how could that tourism could be done in a different way? If you had an organization in the slum that was a community-based, not-for-profit, and they organized tours to, take you around the slum, for want of a better word, um, and they came and picked you up from your hotel, and you cycled there by bikes, and the your tour guide for your visit that day was somebody from that community, and your money that you pay for that experience goes to support that not-for-profit, and that
Mm.
not-for-profit then pays and trains tour guides. It invests in the local infrastructure, and so helps, maybe improve water quality, sewage, the removal of sewage. As
Mm.
part of the
And gives the
experience, you
community the
then go and
decision making level of it
gives
as
the
well.
community decision making. Yeah, absolutely. Families can then host one of the tourists or tourist groups for lunch, maybe, and as part of that, the not-for-profit is training local people in food hygiene and how what what a tourism experience is like, to offer that
Mm.
as a sort of paid for experience. And suddenly you think, well, actually, maybe tourism is part of the solution here, and we've flipped the whole thing on its head from being an extractive,
Right.
voyeuristic type experience to actually being part of the solution to providing income, improving lives, improving infrastructure, training people. And that for me is the difference between ethical tourism and non-ethical tourism, is where your money goes, what impact you're having, and how you can recognize that we're a guest in that place, and how can uh, our place there, or our kind of being in that place, how can we have that positive impact?
Mm.
uh, and it's great. Unfortunately, most of tourism is not like that, because of the
No,
scale of
not
it
at
and the
all.
big business and the massive multinationals and all the rest of it. Most tourism is extractive. And things like all-inclusive holidays, cruising. There are lots and lots of examples where tourism is not great, and
Mm.
that's because the
Indeed.
money is extracted, and the people at the end point of tourism are not getting the benefit from it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. While you were talking, it just made me remind me of a book I read years ago, by Robert Newworth, called Shadow Cities, which is
Okay.
a Shadow City is a billion squatters, which is all about how actually, these informal settlements are what he calls the cities of the future. You know, they are growing more rapidly than formal settlements,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and the people who are best to manage those are the people who live there, because they actually do their best by working with the land as much as they can. And I love that kind of idea of, you know, an ethical tourism can kind of facilitate what they need to, you know, and if it's rights based as well, that, and you could be a good advocate for all that kind of stuff. Just a couple
Yes.
of a couple of stories from my point of view. Like, one of my best experiences actually was my partner and I. We went to well, we weren't very well off. This was like one of the half-term holidays while I was training to be a teacher. And in those days,
Okay.
you know, you were on about you had to pay. Well, no, you got a stipend that was worth only about £6,000 a year. So that's all I was basically earning as training to be a teacher, and I had my tuition fees paid for
Yeah.
me. No, I had a student loan which I had to pay back. So anyway,
Okay.
the point was not much money at all. Not much money at all.
Mm.
And my partner was living with me on a visa because she's American, and so we had to get a cheap holiday, but we wanted to go as far as we possibly could. So we decided to go to Alghero. Now, the only way we could get there affordably, unfortunately, was to use something like EasyJet, but that was the only thing we did. Everything else, we stayed in this local B&B called Mario e Giovanna, which is owned by Mario and Giovanni, you know. Lovely thing. And what we didn't realise is, because Alghero, it was the off season, this was February, everything was shut. Everything was shut.
Yeah.
Right? And there was this one time when Anya and I were walking around Alghero, and we were happy as, you know, everything was shut, but we were happy as pie because we were taking in the architecture, we were absorbing ourselves in, it was dead quiet, but we were absorbing ourselves. It's quite nice not to be there in tourism season. And then it started raining. We were like, oh, you know, what are we going to do? Everything's shut. We just go back to the B&B. And then as we were walking through this very old part of town with the very tight cobbled streets and the houses kind of like the apartments almost leaning on top of each other, we hear this shout behind us, "Hey, Kid Anya, Kid Anya!" And we like turn around. There's Mario in the doorway of a closed restaurant beckoning us over, right? So he says, "Come out of the rain, come out of the rain, come out of the rain." And then we're like, "Whoa, this is a coincidence." So he calls us into this restaurant. He says, "This is my brother's restaurant." And we're just sitting, we're just doing what, you know, this is Italy based. This is Sardinia. We're just sitting here, we're having a chat, we're drinking, having a chat, we're closed, all that stuff. And they gave us lunch. They gave us shot after shot of something called Mirto, which is almost like it's like amaretto, but sort of thing.
Okay.
And
Nice.
we were just there the whole afternoon. Afternoon, just in their company, their kindness. I said, "Do you want us to give you some money?" No, it's fine, you know. And that was a bit serendipitous, but I tell you what,
It would never have happened if you'd stayed at the Hilton.
Right, exactly, because we got to know them as people. They were so kind, so generous, and when Mario saw us walking in the rain, he was like, just coincidentally, we're walking past at the right time. He was like, "I think that's two people staying at my bed and breakfast." And he just called us in, introduced him to his brother, and we left that quite drunk. Actually, it was about like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were just like, Mirto brains. But it was great.
But,
So that's
you know,
that's
those
one
are the
example.
experiences those are the experiences you remember from tourism. You know, it's the people that you meet,
Right.
I think, that really make a destination. We all know what the Taj Mahal looks like, or we all know what Machu Picchu looks like. You know, you can get a VR headset experience of Machu Picchu, you know, in 5 minutes on YouTube,
Right.
and Instagram and all the rest of it. And so to sort of get beyond that and get beyond the brochures and the Instagrammable bits, you have to meet the people, and you're not going to do that
Right.
if you enclose yourself in a Western facing brand and all inclusive. Like, well, why do I need to leave the hotel grounds? You know, I've come all the way to wherever it is,
Yes.
Caribbean or south of France or wherever, and I
I
don't even
can't
need to
stand
leave.
those. No, I
No,
can't. No,
well,
I
same,
know.
yeah.
I can't do the other. We don't have enough time for me to go into too much detail, but I have talked about it in the podcast a lot for regular visitors. And it's when was out in Malawi for a couple of weeks on a teacher exchange, and so we were really absorbed because we were every single day we were hanging out with the teachers and the students of the local secondary school. And one of the best things, very quickly, I'll say this one, is that me and my good friend Joss Mack, hi Joss, who taught drama at the school I taught when I was teaching geography, I taught a bit of drama as well, is that we wanted to go and see one of her friends from a previous teacher exchange visit, and he was only like just a few, I think it was a few miles away, like maybe 5 miles away, in a village outside of Dedza in Malawi. And Joss was like, right, the only way to get there is by bicycle taxi. There is no other way of getting there because the infrastructure is not appropriate for cars or anything like that. You can only really get there through bicycle taxi. And so we hired a bicycle taxi, and went all the way to a 2-hour bicycle taxi out to Mchenica to see Davey and his family and his primary school out there. And chatting to the cyclists and things. And even I, at the time, I was much fitter in those days. I was like, do you want me to take over? It's like, no, my pleasure. He was like, Silio Zungu, my pleasure. And it was just lovely. And then we saw everything on the way through. We saw people walking their bikes with giant, massive, like bits of hay or bits of wood all over their, going to and from market. And then we were saying hi to people. I think the person on on the way back, our best friend Francis, who's from Umwe, Dedza, he sent his eldest to go get us, him and his eldest friend, to go get us. And it was like 15, 16. I was like, you can go pick up Kit and Joss. So they cycled out to Mchenica and then brought us back. And they got like a puncture on their tyre, and then they had to fix it while we were waiting. I was like, oh, I know how to fix tyre. I was like, oh, okay. So we were fixing the tyre, having a chat, talking about, it was great. It was great. But there were so many stories I have from Malawi. So, but what I do want to talk to you about is these school trips. So here's mine. I'll share mine and you share yours, okay. Right?
Yeah, go on then. Yeah.
You can pick one of the many 8,000. So mine was, I managed to organise a trip to the United States, to the Yellowstone National Park area for 12 high school students. And the way I managed to do that was not a package or stuff like that. It was completely self-led. Now, recognising my privilege that I was able to do this is because my wife's in-laws on her dad's side have a house out in Bozeman, Montana, which they built for her grandfather, and it was big enough to have the whole family over, often. And actually, it was big enough for me to take over 12 kids and 3 adults, including myself. And my father-in-law was there as well to keep an eye on us and the house and everything. So, and I jokingly said, it'd be great if this house, we could use it as a field trip base. And I was just joking. But then my wife's aunt said, that's a great idea. You should bring some school students over. I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. So we organised we got our flights through the co-op and stuff like that, but everything else, and car hire, minibus hire, but everything else was completely self-led, self-funded, self-organised. So our trip to Yellowstone National Park, I rung up the park so to say, we're coming all the way from England, what can you do for us, blah, 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 blah. Our friends down the road owned a wolf sanctuary bed and breakfast. So we went, I said, I know you don't do visits. That's not your kind of thing. You're a bed and breakfast. Yeah. But I said, Kit, you're a friend of ours. Come bring your kids over and we'll talk to them about the wolves. They can see the wolves and, that can't be released into captivity and stuff like that. Yeah, Yellowstone National Park, took them to Montana State University, Museum of the Rockies. And because I knew Bozeman very, very well, I designed a settlement mapping activity where I dropped them off at various points around Bozeman and they all had to walk a transect towards Main Street. Where I bought them a root beer float or something like that, and it was, I tell you, some of those kids now are in their late 20s or whatever, and this was when they were like 12, 13, 14, and every time I bump into them or they speak to me, they just say that I would never forget that experience. Never, ever forget that experience. Yeah. So we fundraised, we did charity drives, we did litter picks, we did competitions at school, everything we could to get the cost of that trip down. And in the end, I paid for my own flight ticket. Accommodation was zero because it was my family's house. Yeah. I think we managed to get it down to about £1,200 each-ish for 10 days in Yellowstone area of the USA. What an experience that was.
Yeah, and you're right. Those students will always remember that trip. They won't always
Yeah.
remember the chemistry lesson, or the maths, or the English
Most
literature
won't know.
book that they read, but they absolutely will remember the teacher that took them on a great adventure, or pushed them outside of their comfort zone, or showed them that Marrakesh market, or the top of a summit in the Himalayas, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Most of them hadn't
Uh,
been on a plane before.
sure, yeah, 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 yeah. And for me, uh, my own travels, uh, every one of them is like seared into your memory, because it's such an eye-opening experience, and so rich and full of just amazing things. Whether that's wildlife or scenery or different culture, or environments, whatever. And it's just such an incredibly rich learning environment. And you don't have to go to the other side of the world to have that, but you do
No.
have to get outside the classroom and be surrounded by it, and sort of have that immersive education environment, rather than think we're limited to books and a whiteboard, or yeah. So
So can you
yeah.
give us one? Because I've always with these chats, I wish we had more time than we did. Can you? Is there any particular trip you did, or a location that you went to where you took kids, and like there was just this, like maybe your number one memory or one of your top memories of something so profound that you realised that the kids were getting, and you just felt from the youngsters this was like a life changing experience for them. I mean,
uh
you must have a few.
yeah, I had a few. Yeah, I mean, we, as a company, STC Expeditions, was the company that I set up. I've actually since left, and in October last year, I sold so I could concentrate on the Bioasis. Um, but we were quite unique in uh, the school adventure expedition world, in that we used leaders from the destination, again for responsible tourism reasons. We went out prior to groups going out, and we would train our leaders in those destinations as to how we wanted them to lead our school groups. So it was very rare for us to actually travel with a school group. We'd set it all up in advance, and we'd let
Mm.
the local person sort of deliver all that. And again, they'd get a much richer experience, and all the history and the politics. Our leaders would know all of that. And
Yep.
uh, so I think, uh, yeah, I have to pinch myself, with many of the things that I've managed to set up over the years. Uh,
Mm.
the One of the best, I think, is Kenya, and our team in Kenya that we used. Had an amazing whitewater rafting setup on the River Tana,
Ah.
and we had a couple of programs that mixed that with a like a multi-day cycle in on the edges of the Masai Mara. So
Nice.
wildlife watching whilst cycling, camping at night in the bush, and then that would take them down to the Rift Valley and do. There's a very traditional Maasai community in the Rift Valley, and they would have a. We set up a program there where the women could host our students, and rather than the typical sort of white savior volunteer project, for want of a better word, we feel like you have to, you're going to go and save Africa in 5 days with a
Oh
few tins
goodness.
of paint and a paintbrush. Yeah, don't get me started. It's
It's band
terrible.
aid all over again.
Um, yeah, absolutely. But we set up this program that was very much a shared learning experience. So it was the local Maasai would teach our students, how to make their beads, and go, and they'd help walk in the cattle at night. They'd have talks from the
That's
local
amazing.
scientific researchers there that would be helping the locals look at land use and movement of animals um, with the different seasons, all this sort of thing. So it's just, for me, just that whole immersion into a culture, a place, a people, not on some uh, kind of Western, we know best type tourism activity. It's
Oh
like,
goodness,
what
yes.
can we learn from you, and what can you potentially learn from us? But not in a we know it way. It's just that shared uh, experience. And one of the most powerful things I think was having a sitting down and making time for the local Maasai women to have a open Q&A with the students and the teachers, facilitated uh, through a interpreter, and literally anything was on the cards. So the Maasai women would be asking the students about what it was like to grow up as a young person, what school was like, um, talking about FGM, talking about local politics, talking about
Mm,
hierarchical structures in the tribal cultures, and literally anything went. And that was just setting that up, and I felt super privileged to
that's,
uh, have a job and a company that could set up that kind of experience. And me setting that up and meeting them felt like, wow, this is absolutely blowing my mind. Imagine what it must do for a 15, 16, 17-year old who's never been outside of the UK
goodness,
before.
yes.
Uh,
Oh my
so
goodness.
that, although we don't get to see the impact long term on these young people, we know that it has a massive impact, and it's
Yeah,
why it's so
yeah.
important that schools facilitate these trips, not necessarily to Kenya. uh, you know some of the big destinations for us were Morocco, India, before the Israel-Palestinian conflict, current conflict. Israel-Palestine was a big destination for us, and again, incredibly educational on so many different levels. Uh,
Mm,
and then, yeah, in October, last year, I sort of thought that actually, in the pandemic, obviously our STC expeditions, was pretty tough, but we managed to survive. And as that came roaring back in the last couple of years, I was left with two businesses because we'd started the Bioasis during the pandemic,
mm.
with the perspective of what would it look like if we tried to take one of those overseas expeditions and deliver it in the UK to be low cost and low carbon. And so last year I decided, can't do both of these. Let's try and work out. I need to focus on one, and I felt
Sure.
Bioasis is where I see my future. And so um,
Yeah.
we've tried to recreate that immersive experience, taking young people off grid into an amazing estate, 5,000-acre estate we're working on, and they get involved in conservation work. They get involved in adventure activities. We don't allow any mobile phones. There are no mirrors on site. It's a question of
Oh,
just going back and getting people connecting to each other, to nature. And I know that it's a pretty powerful experience. Young people don't want to get on the coach on the way back because they don't
oh
want to go
wow.
back to where they were at home. They don't want to open their phones up again because they've actually quite enjoyed not having access to social media. Um, so yeah, I think for us, this whole thing is trying to get that impact, and facilitate that change, behaviour change, and open up those questions about climate change and
Mm,
biodiversity loss in that immersive environment, and connect what they're learning in the classroom to the real world, and seeing what's going on in the real world, what good land management looks like, what low carbon uh, immersive residential school trips look like, that go a little bit beyond just you're climbing a climbing tower on a Monday morning and you're doing rafting on a Tuesday afternoon.
oh
And
right, yeah,
it's
your classic PGL stuff, yeah.
yeah,
To
yeah,
name drop.
I didn't want to say it, but yeah, yeah.
I did.
So we're trying to, there are so many dots that need connecting on this. And for me, education is traditionally quite siloed. And you go in and you
Yes,
learn your
yes.
geography, and then you go out of geography and you go in and you learn your history, and you come out of history and you go in and learn your biology.
Mm,
And what we're trying to do at
totally
the
agree.
Bioasis is connect all of that. and connect, as well as connect the personal development side of it. And so, tackling mental health through time in nature and not having phones, uh, feeding into citizen science projects on a canoe trip by including water sample quality testing. Um, and, the world's not siloed, the world is completely connected. And all of these
Yeah.
different subjects that we learn and all these things that we do. So, why are we teaching them? Why are we learning them in siloed things? So, for us, the Bioasis is really pulling all of that together in the context of what a mess we're in at the moment in terms of climate change and biodiversity loss, and how can we install in young people that agency and that belief that actually it's not all a lost cause. We can fire people up, we can give them the agency and the action, positive hope, active hope, that actually if you go and do some conservation work in an amazing place, you can instantly see your effect that you're having. You understand the reasons why that's happening, or what the issue was to begin with, and you can think, actually, yeah, I might only be one person, or 10 people, or 20 people, or 100 people on a school residential uh,
Right.
year group,
Yeah.
and yeah, we can have a positive impact, and we can then take that back and learn it, you know, put that into practice when we're home. So
That's amazing. So, with regards to linking this, so this, I mean, this is incredible. This is brilliant, and so now thinking as a school teacher myself, so say I would say sort of like I would absolutely aim for this kind of experience for my students, 100%. But kind of coming short of that, and perhaps this is where the climate ambassador scheme comes in, is how are you using your or plan to use your status as a climate ambassador, which is of course a voluntary scheme, to kind of bring the work that you do at Bioasis into schools themselves, and hopefully somewhere down the line,
yeah,
perhaps even schools write it into their climate action plan that are local to this area, can
sure,
say, we
yeah,
have an
yeah.
aspiration of actually sending our kids to this. But for the time being, for this interim period, what can you do as a climate ambassador for through your work in the Bioasis?
Yeah, sure. So we're actually currently developing some mini missions. Uh, all the
Mini,
Bioasis
or I
stuff
like
is
that.
is mission led. So it's actually sort of set in the future in a rather dark post climate change apocalypse uh, type escape room environment. But um,
Mm,
we're actually developing some mini missions that groups and teachers can try and easily bring the wild back to their classroom, and just make nature more tangible. I think, particularly city centre schools, obviously, surround
yes.
some young people. You don't even have to go to London. Young people in Plymouth or Truro, have not ventured to the coastline, and so
Right.
to to try and bring that connectivity to nature, I think, is supremely important for people's mental health, for their understanding of what the issues are around biodiversity and climate change. And you don't need to travel to the Bioasis or to Kenya or wherever to have that interaction with nature. You can literally go to your local park. And if you think a little bit more creatively as to how you are interacting with nature, what lessons you can take out of that. I wrote a blog a while ago about what if we took the whole curriculum outside. I mean, literally the whole
Nice.
thing
Yeah. Yeah.
outside. What could you? How would we reimagine it? How would we then start to think differently about how we're imparting that information? And so suddenly, chemistry lessons, you can look at photosynthesis and the seasons and physics. There's so much that you could bring if we start thinking a little
Yeah.
bit differently about it. And you don't need to pay for a residential experience. Great, because obviously the impact is going to be bigger if we can take you away for 5 days. Um,
Mm,
but we can start small, absolutely. And on a simple basis, if you, as a teacher, if you've got some sort of area of land in your school grounds, can you start rewilding that a little bit? Can you plant a few trees? Can you make a little bit place go a little bit wild? Plant some wildflowers. Make some bee hive, insect cities or whatever they're called, and just bring a little bit of nature into school. It doesn't have to cost much, and just to make that a little bit tangible. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where, folks, one of the sister projects like National Education Nature Park is absolutely perfect for that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So I can see, for example, a school in your area, Adrian, getting in contact with, say, you through Nikki as a climate ambassador, and then working with the Southwest National Education Nature Park folks to come up with a really comprehensive thing that a school can do. And you've got that
Yes.
really tangible link with Bioasis there. And, maybe 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30 schools who engage that kind of thing actually come and send their kids to. That would be amazing. So
Yeah.
we're running out of time, unfortunately. I just
Okay.
want to go on something because I don't want to let you get away with it, and that is I want you to spill the beans about the fact that you're in a rocking gospel choir. So I want you to talk
Rocking
about that
gospel
for a
choir.
couple of minutes.
Sure. So I sing. I've sung for many years in bands at university and then choirs on and off since. Currently, I am singing in Soul of the City Gospel Choir, which is in Exeter, and
Nice.
it's big range. Some people are religious, some people are not. Some of the songs are religious, some are not. But what brings everybody together, actually, it's a fantastic community, is a love of good music. And some of them are not so rocking, but some of them absolutely are rocking. And we were finalists in the BBC Gospel Choir of the Year
Oh wow.
18 months ago. And we've go on little tours up to London. I didn't manage to go, but they went up to London, did a concert up in London recently, and we're doing a joint concert with a Italian choir coming up in Plymouth in the next at the end of April. It's just a great.
Nice.
I guard my Tuesday nights with a vengeance, so I can go to choir practice. So this evening we have 2 hours
Just trying to see if
practice
I can
and
see you on this photo.
I'm the big one at the front in the middle.
Oh yeah, there you are.
Yeah, yeah. It's great. We've very fortuitously practiced just above a pub. So after practice, we go and have a few drinks, and just a wonderful social experience. Yeah. So
And
it's good.
there's Adrian.
Good fun.
I'll put a
Yeah.
link to
There
I'll
I
put a
am.
link to that. People can have a check of that. Yeah, there you are. Yeah, really rocking it.
Yeah,
Crikey, you're a
dude.
tall
Yeah.
lad.
Yeah. I am. Yeah, about 6'3". Next to Christine, I look even taller. She's a friend.
Oh, bless. Oh. So we'll finish off now, Adrian, with our last little feature, which is We Are All Geographers. So pairing you up with the previous guest and connecting you to our next guest. So last week we had the wonderful Amelia Grigg, who's the climate ambassador for Central Bedfordshire Council. And she took a very abstract and personal view of the word boundaries for 30 seconds. And then when I asked Amelia what I would like you to talk about for 30 seconds, she actually was not sure, and she just said frogs, because that's one of her favourite frogs. But I said, but I know who I'm talking to next week. I think that's a really good word for this person to talk about for 30 seconds. So Adrian, for 30 seconds, non-stop, I want you to riff about frogs. All right, so tell me when you're ready.
Frogs. Okay. Yeah, let's go.
Go.
So I think frogs are massively misunderstood, and maybe glossed over in terms of likable animals. We had a frog down at the Bioasis recently that somebody picked up, and we were a long way from a water source, and we're like, where has this come from? So yeah, I think they're great. Like, just who doesn't love a frog? Like, I put a pond in our garden here. difficult.
It is, yeah. So before I ask you for your word, do folks want to hear my? So I used to read the Frog and Toad books to my kids, the Arnold LaBelle books, right? So these are my voices. So I'll see if you can picture it, folks. So let's see if I can remember one of the stories. Oh yeah. Oh Toad, is this one of your buttons? I found your button. No, that is not my button. My button was round. It was not square. Oh, Toad, is this your button? I think this one's your button. That's not my button. Sorry. That's my take on frogs. Frog and Toad.
Yeah, and it didn't even mention.
Anyway. Yeah, the frog was the first one. Yeah, I don't know. I know frogs. I thought have a little bit more of a higher pitch voice, and Toad had a little bit of a deeper voice with a bit of a bit more of a swell in his cheeks as well. Yeah, but anyway, I think I'm lost on this doing this podcasting nonsense. Anyway, what would you like to come up with your word, Adrian?
So I have something on my desk here. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little
okay
tomato timer. And so I was thinking that the next word could be pomodoro or tomato. Pomodoro if you want to go a little bit international. And the reason I've got this on my desk, Pomodoro technique is a way of focusing so you set a timer for 25 minutes and you focus on the thing that you work that you need to get done. And then you have 5 minutes break, and then you do another 25 minutes. Tomatoes, I think, would be a good. There's loads of geography around tomatoes. I mean,
yeah, perfect. So tomatoes it is, and actually there is an app online which is called a Pomofocus, which you can actually set yourself a time for 25 minutes. I'm going to try that, 25-minute sprints and then 5 minutes off. Because my ADHD, I need structure, so that might actually work. Right. Okay, Adrian, is there anyone you'd like to give a shout out to? And where can folks find you on, say, social media or LinkedIn or anything like that?
I would like to give a shout out to my Bioasis team. Tara, our ops manager, and Elliot, our programs and sustainability manager. The three of us won an award on Friday for Extra Sustainability Awards. So we're pretty chuffed with that, and it's great just working with a great team, wanting to get stuff done. So amazing. I'll shout out to them. What was the other question?
And where can people find you? I think you're on LinkedIn, aren't you, as well as obviously via the Bioasis website.
Yeah, and we're also on Instagram and Facebook and Blue Sky as well.
Blue Sky. And of course, obviously, if you keen to get Adrian and his team, through the Climate Ambassador Scheme, you can also contact Nikki at the Southwest Regional Hub. Adrian, I've really loved this discussion. It's been so great.
It's been great.
I've loved to share experiences and stuff like that. And and I know our listeners have had a really great time as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Coffee and Geography, folks. If you're itching to know more about the Climate Ambassador's awesome work, visit www.climateambassadors.org. Don't forget to follow us on Blue Sky at geogramblings.com and use the CoffeeJogPod hashtag to stay in the loop. Submit your questions for our guests on LinkedIn or Blue Sky with hashtag JogQOverABrew. Keep exploring this amazing world, tackling climate action, and flexing your geography muscles. Stay curious, keep jogging, and keep making waves.